As a longtime foreign correspondent, I've worked in lots of places, but nowhere as important to the world as China. I'm Jane Perlez, former Beijing bureau chief for the New York Times. Join me on my new podcast, Face Off, US versus China, where I'll take you behind the scenes in the tumultuous US-China relationship. Find Face Off wherever you get your podcasts.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. It's Henry Zamota and Danny Abdel-Jabbar. What's up, man? How are you?
Chilling, man. As per usual. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. Third time's a charm, right?
Seriously. I feel like once every quarter or so we have to have a couple of false starts, a couple flags on the play.
Well, yeah. Well, that was because of now an airplane is flying over my house, so
if it makes you feel any better, I can't hear it at all. So
okay,
we gotta just ignore it.
We can never escape these sounds, man. I thought when we started podcasting, and my big problem was an ambulance and a train in the background or a subway station in the background, because I used to live next to a hospital, which I'm sure old school listeners remember me saying every episode. It's like, I live next to a hospital. Now it's airplanes and still trains.
Yeah.
Still trains. I live next to another railroad that's louder. And babies crying in the background. So you can never escape the background noise. But you know what? People who complain about the sounds of life in your background, I don't know what to tell you. It's a recording. Things are going to get caught in the microphone. Things and events and other people will be caught in your recording sometimes. And
yeah, I know you all think that we're super famous, and we are, but I'm kidding. No, I mean, we're just regular guys doing a podcast about history and stuff like that. We're not in a special recording studio with Joe Rogan or anything like that. It's like a home setup, so you're going to hear a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Just roll with it. It's fun.
we haven't really invested anything into our recording equipment since we started, which is kind of funny.
Well, that's not true. We've upgraded twice, but it's just there are things that would be impossible to get rid of unless you had a treated studio, I think the next level there would be a straight up sound foam all over the walls, windows boarded up kind of deal, where it's quiet. We've reached the peak without getting to it.
Well, the thing about that is that you put the foam on the wall, and then you can hear another background noise, me fidgeting with some fucking paperclip.
That would happen one way or another. Recording studio.
Me fidgeting with a paperclip.
Yeah.
You put that shit on the wall, it gets stuck, and then, the glue gets stuck to the wall, then you have to repaint, and it's just a pain in the ass. So I'm not even doing that now. So I've actually downgraded because I have less foam on my wall than my previous home. But you guys don't care about this at all, so why even talk about it? What we are talking about today in the news is that apparently, and I knew nothing about this, the former president was in trial for something. Let's look at my notes. For engaging with a pornographer or whatever. So I haven't really
Barack Obama here, or
Barack Obama. So yeah, Trump was found guilty, which is, I don't know. I didn't expect it to happen earlier when he was first indicted on these charges, but as I guess I saw things playing out, and honestly, I haven't really been following it closely. I don't really follow too much presidential politics or campaign news and things like that. honestly, I just don't have time to follow it like we used to. You know, a couple
So
of years
most of it
ago,
is unhealthy, so it's probably good for you that you don't follow it constantly.
yeah, a couple of years ago, I remember the low point of this entire show is when we did an episode on Mike Pence and Kamala Harris and their debate,
Yeah.
the VP
Yeah,
debate.
we actually covered their debate. Mm-hmm.
And we, after recording that, I was like, man, that's the worst episode we've ever done. Why would we even waste our time talking about something so irrelevant and so stupid?
Yeah.
So I don't think we've really talked about U.S. politics in a long time, at least since like last election. We usually focus, when we do talk about politics, it's like, you know, big money politics or international politics. Now, in this case, this is obviously a special circumstance because it is unprecedented, and I think it will have a pretty big impact throughout history. So I think we kind of have to discuss it, because I do want your opinion. I don't know what your opinion is, so I'm curious to hear it. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out in the long run, because I think there's multiple ways that it could. I guess the first note I'll make is that, you know, I was like, after the news came out, I was like, went on Twitter and I looked into I joined a Twitter space, and all it was just people screaming at each other, like you super, like very hyper partisan Democrats and very hyper partisan Republicans, or Trump supporters just like yelling at each other. Mm-hmm. And I was like, man, everyone needs to like just chill out for a second. Jesus Christ. Like these people are going insane. We, you know, you and I are pretty different on the, you know, we agree in a lot. We disagree in a lot. We definitely come from, you know, different, I guess, political heritages or
I'd agree with that.
So I'm interested. Maybe it's worth just like discussing, I guess, the facts and what exactly happened, and then we can just give our opinions.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's start with just what happened and try our best to be as objective as possible in this. I know it's going to be very hard, especially all the news that you're going to listen to, all the, you know, podcasts you're going to hear are going to obviously tint it one way or another. And I think what's going to be interesting about this show is that Henry and I come from pretty opposite political backgrounds, at least initially. I think we found our way to the middle with each other. But let's just talk about what happened. So there's this trial going on right now. It's still ongoing, by the way, because, you know, there's still things to do. It's not over, but it's dubbed the hush money trial, and it involves obviously former President Donald Trump. And it's in New York City, and it centers around these allegations that Trump falsified some business records to cover up payments that were made to the adult film actress Stormy Daniels, and that was before the 2016 presidential election. Trump pleaded not guilty to those charges and claimed that, you know, the prosecution was politically motivated. The background on this is that the case stems from a $130,000 payment that was arranged by Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to Stormy Daniels in exchange, allegedly, for her silence about, you know, an alleged affair that they had. And Trump, I'm going to say allegedly a lot here because we kind of have to, but I don't know. Can I say not allegedly anymore now that he's been found guilty? I don't know. Let's find out. My point, Trump allegedly reimbursed Cohen through his business records, which evidently were falsely labeled as legal expenses. So basically what we're talking about here is that he paid off Stormy Daniels, but the way that they filed it, you know, was incorrect, right? And this act of falsifying business records, because that's what it would be, would normally be considered a misdemeanor, but in this particular case had been elevated to a felony because the prosecutors are arguing that it was done in order to commit or conceal another crime, and they're specifically referencing, you know, trying to influence the 2016 election, which would be a crime. We heard, this has been going on for several weeks. I think it started April 15th, and it was like pretty much proceedings were like every day, except for Wednesdays or something like that. And they've had a bunch of different testimonies. One of the big ones was from David Pecker, who is a former publisher of the National Enquirer. And, he ended up testifying about this catch and kill scheme where a thing that he had going on with Trump, where negative stories about Trump were bought and suppressed from the news. Apparently this is just, what they do. And Pecker testimony highlighted his role in supporting Trump's campaign in that way by preventing these damaging stories from being published, including and up to the payments that were made to other individuals, claiming to have negative information about Trump. Now, the legal and political implications here are that Trump's defenses, they argued that he didn't commit a crime and that the payments were personal matters and that they weren't related whatsoever to campaign finance. But unfortunately, despite his claims, a significant portion of the public, I think, viewed these charges as serious, and that's why they were brought up in the first place. So polls indicated that while many believe Trump falsified those records, the opinions are divided pretty staunchly on party lines about whether or not this impacts the 2024 presidential campaign. Like I said, this has been going on since April 15th. There have been several unsuccessful attempts by Trump to delay these specific proceedings. And the judge in this case, Juan Merchan, has also had to address accusations from prosecutors that Trump had been violating gag orders that he made. If you remember or had been following this at all, apparently the judge kept saying, stop talking shit about this this case outside of the courtroom, and he kept doing it. So it got to a point where he almost had to throw him in jail during it. But yeah, he had violated those gag orders by making those public comments about the trial and the witnesses. But Trump has obviously continued to criticize the trial and specifically the judge on social media, and has been maintaining that, his stance is that the case is unfair and that it's politically motivated. And obviously this could potentially have ramifications for Trump's political future and the 2024 election. But I think regardless of the outcome, there's no legal barrier preventing like a convicted felon for running for or holding the presidency. So really this doesn't block anything at all. But today, the big news is that after several weeks of deliberation, Trump was convicted on all 34 felony counts in the hush money trial here in New York. It's pretty historic, obviously, because Trump becomes the first former U.S. president to be criminally convicted. So that's new. And this case revolved around, obviously the allegations that we talked about. But, I think, after this verdict, Trump, he's free right now on bail. So he's not like in jail or anything like that. He's waiting for a sentencing hearing, which I think is set for July 11th. And the potential sentences that he could get, I did a little bit of digging on this. It could include fines, it could be probation, or could even be prison time. But because this is a first-time offender for what's considered a non-violent crime, I think Trump probably won't face jail time immediately. He's probably going to appeal the conviction, which makes sense. Anyone in his position should. And that will probably prolong the legal process significantly. But, that remains to be seen. And I think despite the conviction, like I said before, this doesn't impact Trump's ability to run for president. There's no constitutional barriers that prevent him or any convicted felon for running or even holding the office of presidency. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, there was, I think, another Republican who was running from jail. I got to Google that real quick while you talk.
Eugene Debs. He was a socialist, and he was arrested for conviction. He was arrested for sedition. So he was telling
he was still
people
running for president, right?
Well, this was in during World War I. He was basically telling people that the war was the complete, it was a complete lie, and it was a banker's war, which he was right about. But what he was arrested for and what he was convicted for was actively telling people and encouraging people not to avoid the draft. So he was charged with sedition.
And for that, he was charged for sedition.
He was charged in sedition, and he ran for president, the 1920 presidential campaign from his jail cell. So they
he obviously didn't win. So
no, he got 3% of the vote, but
yeah,
his supporters.
I mean, that's still pretty impressive from jail.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he became more popular because of that. I mean, it's more than the libertarian.
I was just going to say that's
right?
like better than the libertarians do now.
It's better than the libertarians or the Green Party.
Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, and people would used to wear like these like stickers that showed camaraderie with his prison sentence. So yeah, I mean, it's happened before. I guess the big question is, and I don't want to make a comment on like whether I agree with like the jury, whether I think it was an unfair or fair trial. I'm not really that interested in that, to be completely honest. What I'm more interested in is what are the implications going to be? Because it doesn't really matter what you and I think, whether we think one way or another. It's really what does the average like moderate voter think? And then what does, how's big money going to come into play? Mm-hmm. Like, is big money going to come in and exploit this? Meaning, are they going to say, okay, Mr. Trump, you're in a bind, we can help you. You need to do this much, do this and that. If you are,
and put a pin in that one because I think it's already happening. Let me write this down because we need to come back to that.
Those are the questions that I'm interested in, is how this will be exploited in terms of power politics and like real things that affect the state.
Yeah, I think it's already happening. So to the first question, I think I agree with you, Henry. I think it doesn't matter what you and I think. I will say that regardless of what we think, our voices are irrelevant in terms of any potential case that we're not ourselves jurors of. What mattered for this particular case is that the jury that was placed there thought he was guilty of whichever crimes the prosecution brought against him. So that's, I think, foremost, even before your initial question of like, what does the general public think? But as far as the zeitgeist goes, which I know this is kind of like what you want to talk about, like how does this impact politics? How does this impact, U.S. elections? You raise a really interesting question of like, what does the moderate think? I don't actually know that it has that this case has a very large impact at all.
No one knows.
Yeah, of course we can never know,
right.
But we can obviously pontificate a little bit, right? That's kind of the point of the show.
but I agree. I agree with you in the sense that everyone is making these predictions, like, "Oh my God, this is going to kill Trump,"
right?
And then you have other people who are like, "Oh, this is going to boost his support." Mm-hmm. We don't really know how this is going to swing the election because it's so unprecedented. This hasn't happened. The last time a major executive was elected head of state who was a felon to a major power was Adolf Hitler.
Yeah.
and Hitler's crimes were a bit more serious than Trump's crimes. I mean, Hitler went to jail for conducting a street push. So
right.
it's interesting to see. I mean, will this swing the election at all? Like, it could. It may help him. It may not help him. It may not do anything. It may not change. So it may not move the hair at all.
I'm in that camp, kind of the it's not going to do anything camp, because I think I don't think that that there's a very broad group of people for whom this changes their mind.
Yeah.
Right? Like you were saying, you went to this Twitter space, right? And you see some very virulent people that are on the left that are like, oh yeah, fuck Trump, he should go to jail, right? And then there's the MAGA, Trumpers that are saying, this is an affront on, fucking democracy. I don't know what the hell they're saying. I don't pay attention to them either.
Lawfare.
Exactly. So I don't think that this case changes either of those camps' minds. And unfortunately, I think if you sum up the number of people in this country, that those two groups added together are the majority of the country, right? So this leaves a very, very small group of people who are neither, huge Trumpers or neither anti-Trumpers, for whom this case may or may not, impact. So as an example, what we're talking about here is a white collar crime. So already, it's not like rising to the occasion of, it's not like he killed somebody, right? He didn't do some violent crime here. Although I'd like
he has killed people as president, though.
Yeah, well, that's different. It's in his capacity
But
as president.
I mean, everyone has killed people as president.
Right, exactly. That's par for the course. But I guess what I'm saying is he hasn't himself personally taken a life, right? If this case was about, he fucking drove his car, which I don't even think he drives, so that's a bad example. It would be like as if he, like, I don't know, beat the shit out of someone on the golf course.
Did it Ted Kennedy or something?
Right. Like,
well, Ted Kennedy didn't.
Yeah, like if
Ted
he did
Kennedy
something like to actually hurt somebody,
Yeah.
then this might actually have a different impact, in my opinion, especially among that group of people that I think are either undecided or kind of in the middle. But this isn't. This is a white collar crime, and again, I'm not saying that that he shouldn't be charged or that charges shouldn't have been brought against them or that he shouldn't have been convicted. I actually do think that he should have, right? But that doesn't matter really, because do people give a shit about white collar crime? Especially because the crux of this is that he fucked a porn star and tried to cover it up, and the way that he decided to cover it up happened to be illegal, right? So, do people care?
And I don't think most people do. Who hasn't paid hush money to a pornographer? With money, let me add that caveat. With billions of dollars.
Well, $130,000 actually. It was pretty cheap on that.
With a net worth of billions of dollars. That's what I mean.
He's currently going to court about whether or not he's inflated his net worth for criminal gains.
You get the point I'm saying. An extremely wealthy person.
Okay. He's more wealthy than me, I'll give him that.
An extremely wealthy person who hasn't bribed people. I mean, listen, man, I haven't been following the case that closely because frankly, I haven't really been that interested in it. Mm-hmm. But I have been interested, I haven't been interested in the technical stuff. I haven't listened to Michael Cohen's testimonies or any of that. I just don't have time to follow that type of stuff.
Right.
However, I think it's interesting because now that Trump is in legal trouble, there is first and foremost, I just want to throw a bone to Trump supporters right now. If I was a Trump supporter, I would absolutely think this is a sham. I'd be like, oh yeah, this is complete political warfare. And honestly, from the outside, from my perspective, it does seem pretty. It seems pretty flagrant in terms of just throwing hurdles at him as he's running for president. And I don't know what the last poll.
Just out of curiosity, like why does it appear that way from the outside looking in? Because
he's running for president of the United States. That's why it appears that way.
Okay, and is that the only reason that way?
That's the primary reason, because he's running for president of the United States, and there's a reasonable 50% chance he's going to win or more. I mean,
would you feel differently if he wasn't running for president? Like, let's say he just decided he's not running in 24, but these charges were still brought against him. Do you think they would still feel politically motivated?
If he wasn't involved in politics, then I probably wouldn't think anything of it. But the fact that he's in politics and he is the face of the Republican Party and he's the most popular Republican since Ronald Reagan, and to, around 80 million people in this country, he's their guy, then it makes me think that this was, without a doubt, politically motivated, or political bias at the very least seeped in to the law process.
I find that.
Come on, like, do you think this? Like,
I hear you. I'm not going to deny that. I think you're making a point. I disagree with the point, but you make a point. And I can see how some people, specifically Trump supporters, would find this to be like biased in some way, because Trump is a polarizing character himself, and the fact that he is running for president and that he is, the presumptive candidate for the Republicans, because they haven't managed to find somebody else. You can make that argument. I find that argument, though, very problematic. And the reason why I find it very problematic isn't because I'm not supportive of Trump. I find it problematic even if it was for someone that I did support. I think it's problematic because what it signals is that most people would find any pursuit of a political figure legally as politically motivated or politically biased. And I think that's problematic because, as you and I have covered over the many years, politicians are fucked up people sometimes, and they do things that warrant legal scrutiny. And this is, I'm not speaking about anyone in particular here. I'm speaking broadly, right? Like, every president has done some shit that I think is worth looking into legally. Every high-level, high-ranking, Senate or House, person, congressperson generally, has done something that is worth legally pursuing, and we shouldn't be setting a precedent, and we shouldn't be making arguments around the fact that we shouldn't pursue people, legally, or we should view any pursuit of any high-ranking politician in a legal spectrum as politically motivated. I think that's a cheap way to say, don't get my guy, but when it's somebody else or not your guy, you're okay with it. I find that very problematic. We should be able to fully go after anyone to the fullest extent of what the law says, and nobody should be above that.
Yeah, I agree with you, Danny. I think that the old gentleman's agreement that you won't, prosecute people or presidential candidates for white collar crimes during an election year. Maybe that should go out the window, and everyone should be treated fairly equally under the law. But I mean, the precedent is that you don't try to put your political opponents in jail during a presidential election. Yeah.
So who?
It's impossible.
Who is trying to put their political opponents in jail? I think that's the crux of this question, because I think I've heard this argument as well, and it's being suggested without any conclusive evidence. And trust me, I've actually looked for it, of like the Biden campaign or the Biden administration is directing these prosecutions. Now this is not the only thing that he's been involved in this year. There are many others, but this one in particular is local, right? Like these are local charges from the city of New York. This isn't a federal crime. So the question becomes again now, who is trying to lock up Trump, or pursue him politically? Who stands to gain from this? Does the prosecutor stand to gain? Maybe, he gets a little bit of fame for being the guy that gets Trump. But, that has nothing to do with the election, or it's a personal vendetta. You know what I mean?
They're politically aligned. It's not a matter of it's not the Biden administration is not throwing him in jail like it's some third world despot.
Right.
However, it's in a politically aligned camp throwing him in jail. So it's impossible not to think that this was isolated from his life in politics. And it's impossible not to think that this was not a direct reaction to him running for president of the United States.
I'll throw you a bone. I think you can make a stronger argument in this way by looking at all or most or many of the cases that are currently being brought against him in summation. I think it's easier to make that case when there's many of them, but I'm also going to debunk it as well, right? So there's currently the hush money payments case. That's the one we're talking about right now, the one that he just was found guilty of 34 felony counts. Then there's the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. This one's the trial was initially set for May of 2024, but that's getting delayed indefinitely for reasons. That is a federal case. Georgia election interference case. So that's the one where Trump and several of his associates are charged with, quote, racketeering and conspiracy to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election. That's the one where he makes a phone call and tries to get them to recount some votes. That's a local case. January 6th Capitol riot investigation. So that's the one where special counsel Jack Smith is leading the investigation to see if he had what was his role in inciting the January 6th Capitol riot. Then there's also the New York Attorney General civil fraud case. That's New York AG Letitia James is suing Trump and his family and the Trump organization for allegedly inflating the value of their assets by billions of dollars to get loans and favorable tax benefits. That one's ongoing currently. That's also a local one, New York. Then there's the E. Jean Carroll defamation case. This is a civil case, right? So this is a person against a person where E. Jean Carroll sued Trump for sexually abusing him, her, and for defamation. She was awarded that, and Trump was found liable for that one. And then he opened his big mouth, and then Trump got ordered to pay $83 million in damages for defaming her again. And that's a civil case, right? So, collectively, I think that all of those cases put together pose significant, challenges for Trump in the 2024 election. So I can give you a bone in that respect. So if you try to put them all together, then yeah, it can seem from the outside looking in that they're really out to get him. Lawfare, as you pointed out earlier. But all of these are individual cases ranging from financial penalties, or financial crimes to physical assault and defamation to, political crimes, allegedly. And they span across at least 3 states, federal, and a civil case between individuals. So they're all in different areas. There's not one central hub of, I could see this argument much more if this was these were all federal cases, because the Biden administration has a clear, way to influence that. But this is all over the place, and frankly, most of these cases are just stupid acts that Trump did and got himself in trouble. And I don't think that's it's, again, it doesn't matter what we think. But if you do ask me what I feel, yeah, he did a stupid thing, go after him. If it's illegal, don't let people think that they're above the law. And I would say this for fucking anyone. It doesn't matter if it's Trump or not. It's the principle of it. Don't do illegal shit, and you won't have to worry about this.
Do you worry about the precedent this is going to take? This is going to create?
Depends. Define the precedent. What do you believe the precedent is?
Having politically aligned states, local governments, or politically aligned local governments, whether they're acting in coordination with a centralized political party, or if they're just acting out of like ideological camaraderie, that they start just throwing charges and trying to prosecute a front runner for an executive office. Like, I mean, every single president has these types of criminal or legal liabilities that they have. You don't think this seems like this is selective, and that this is not an intentional way to make his pursuit for a second term less likely? You don't see that at all?
I'll say a few things. One, the first thing is that the states that are in question are all very different states politically and ideologically. So I don't think that particular argument holds water, but I'll ignore that for a moment and just give you the
it's not just the states, it's just the politically aligned people who are actively bringing charges against them.
Yeah, but this is how should I put this? If the shoe is on the other foot, it happens already and has already, right? So I mean, just the moment that any political power gets any political power, they start going after their enemies, and this is it's currently happening against Biden as well. It's just the ones that go against Biden don't stick because they lack substance. As far as it goes with
some of us love history. Others used to or never did because history was presented as nothing but the rote memorization of names, dates, and facts. Basically, the story got left out, and that made history kind of suck. My name is Greg Jackson. I'm a university professor with a PhD in history, and bringing history to life is my passion. That's why I created my podcast, History That Doesn't Suck. I want to teach you everything you need to know about U.S. history, but I do so through stories. Let me tell you about George Washington begging his men not to mutiny against Congress, Clara Barton saving Union soldiers amid enemy fire, enslaved Frederick Douglass risking his life for liberty, and about so many other figures as their real experiences make industrialization, social movements, and even congressional debates and tax policy come to life. Subscribe to History That Doesn't Suck today, and join me, Professor Greg Jackson, every other week for a new episode, where I'd like to tell you a story.
It feels really good to be productive, but a lot of the time it's easier said than done, especially when you need to make time to learn about productivity so you can actually, be productive. But you can start your morning off right and be ready to get stuff done in just a few minutes with the Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day podcast. You'll hear advice on everything from how to build confidence to how to get the best night's sleep. New episodes drop every weekday, and each one is 5 minutes or less, so you only have to listen a little to get a lot more out of your weekdays. Listen and subscribe to Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day wherever you get your podcasts. That's Inc. Productivity Tip of the Day wherever you get your podcasts.
Trump specifically, I don't think that, or rather, I'll take it a few steps back. As far as it goes with you saying, is it that most of these political figures are going to have some criminal or potential criminal liability? Like, should we have political figures with potential criminal liability? Like, I know nobody is perfect and nobody is without sin, but like, to what extent are we okay with, what's the threshold there? In my opinion, and especially given all of these particular cases, with each of them have substance, at least some substance. I mean, he's been indicted. He's been convicted on 34 counts of 34 felony counts. I mean, there's not nothing going on here. My question in retort to that is, why are we okay with political leaders having this much political liability? Why are we okay with this?
Because usually it's scum who gets into politics. That's the real truth, and we're just used to it being par for the course.
So we should demand better. We should demand better.
I do agree. Listen, I disagree with your analysis. Like I do feel like it was politically motivated. But again, just going back to the crux of this, it doesn't really matter what I think, or it doesn't really matter what we both think. It matters what voters think, and it also matters how big money is going to exploit this.
And I'm glad that you brought that. I'm glad that you brought that up. So I want to talk about this because I think it's somewhat related here.
Well, let me just elaborate a little bit more. Mm-hmm. So when I say it matters what like moderate voters is, what I mean is that, I was talking to somebody. I'll just say I was talking to my wife, who's very moderate politically, doesn't have strong political opinions, and I was just asking her. I use her as a way to dive into like the moderate voters' mind. And I asked her, what do you think about this case? And she's like, I think it's bullshit. Like, doesn't seem like it's real. And I just asked like a survey question. I think she voted for Biden last election. Yeah, she did. I'm like, does this make you more likely or less likely to vote for Trump? And she said, more likely to vote for Trump. Now, most likely she's not going to vote for Trump. I'm just guessing what she's going to do. I don't think she will. However, it matters those types of, independent, she's not independent, but like she is independent as she doesn't have any like strong, ideological love for the Democrats. It matters what those types of voters, like who, if that's going to sway anyone. I think going back to your point, I think most people are it's just going to be white noise, and it's just going to be like, oh yeah, just more shit, whatever.
Right.
Like,
I mean, it's May 30th.
How's the economy right now? Like, exactly. Has there been any, violent, street riots? Do I feel safe like walking down the street? It's going to come down to those types of things. So I agree in that sentiment. It doesn't really. I think what this does do is that it just pushes people who are already either have an axe to grind with the administration. It kind of gives them more of an incentive to vote for someone who they feel is in opposition to the state or the current regime.
Right. Much in the same way that it helps the people who are in opposition of Trump to vote for Biden, right? They're like, aha, see, he's a felon. Now I'm definitely not voting for him, right?
Well, yeah, I think
it works on both sides, but it doesn't do it. I don't think it does a whole lot for the middle at all.
Well, I think it does. It would probably give. See, I don't know if this bleeds into the middle of the pack voter.
I don't think so. I don't think it does at all.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
So it certainly will make people who, I think it will get Republicans who may not like Trump to vote for Trump, but those voters were most likely going to vote for Trump anyway. So
by default, right? Same thing with those like kind of middle of the road Democrats who were like, wishy-washy about voting for Biden, and now they're like, well, I don't really want to vote for the guy who just got convicted of felonies, right? Like,
yeah,
like,
so
but those are the people who are likely to vote their party line anyway, right? What we're talking about is a very small but very important voter block that I don't think that this particular case has any reasonable impact, both from a timing perspective. It's May 30th. There's a lot of time between now and the election, right? And also from just like an impact thing. Again, like as laying my cards on the table, as much as I think he should have been charged for these things, and I agree with the verdict of the jury, it, like, grand scheme of things, this is white collar crime. Most people don't give a fuck, right? Most people aren't going to care. Even and especially the people in the middle, they're just gonna be like, all right, well, whatever. He falsified some financial documents. Like, see what my advice to Trump, if hindsight looking 2020, would have been he should have just fucking said, oops, my bad, I did that wrong, that wasn't my intention, right? And it would have been over. But the fact that he said he didn't do shit and I'm innocent and You know, I never slept with Stormy Daniels and like made his whole big stink about it is what got him here in the first place, right? This wouldn't even been a thing if he just would have played his cards right, but he didn't because he's got a fucking loud mouth, right? So kind of did it to himself. Anyway,
he certainly doesn't do himself any favors.
No, he really doesn't.
He definitely lacks a form of tact. And
like honestly, he could have just been like, "Oops, my bad," right? Like, that's not what I intended. You know, that was a mistake. You know, there was no criminal motive here. You know,
they give him excuse. I mean, he certainly gives his enemies a lot of ammo,
right,
or a lot of rope to hang him with. You know what I mean? Like he just sometimes he puts himself in positions where they get him dead to rights. But that being said,
I also just want to point out that like in terms of like this like whether or not this was politically motivated or biased in any way, like Trump, if this were any other person, I'm talking about anybody else but Trump, they would have already been in jail by now, right? Like in particular for this particular case, the judge kept telling Trump, like, stop talking shit on social media, stop trying to, you know, threaten witnesses, stop threatening me, stop doing all this shit. And he kept doing it. And the penalty for this was always $1,000, right? For being in contempt of court. That was the penalty. $1,000. We're talking about Trump here, right? $1,000 isn't shit. Like, I agree with you. He's got wealth. So that penalty didn't mean shit. And at a certain juncture, he was just like, yo, if you don't be quiet, if you don't stop with this shit, you're going to go to jail. I'm going to put you in jail, you know, for being in contempt of court. And it was only then did he shut up, right? So any other normal person would not get as much leash length as Trump did in this trial and in other trials as well. So,
but what about Biden?
But what about Biden, right?
I'm joking. This is but I understand your sentiment. And just, I don't want to make it seem like I'm trying to avoid this because you obviously know more about the case than I do. So I'm not going to be able to refute you. However, to the point, what really matters on this is, you know, how does this impact the middle voter?
Right. And also,
which we have no idea.
Yeah,
it may.
We have no idea, and I think we both agree that it probably doesn't, right? But we still don't know. And then the other thing you wanted to talk about, which I really want to get into this one too, is how does this impact big money politics? Like, who in big money can take this or any of these related cases and use it to their advantage, right? And I actually think that's currently happening. Are you familiar with this situation that's going around where Trump was under some scrutiny for allegedly pressing these oil executives to donate $1 billion to his presidential campaign, and that in exchange he would give them like favorable policy changes for the oil industries? Did you read about this or hear about this at all?
Did this just happen?
Yeah, well, recently, April of this year.
Okay, what happened?
So basically, what he said was he was in this meeting in Mar-a-Lago with a bunch of these oil executives, right? So people from like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and ConocoPhillips, as well as the American Petroleum Institute, right? And they all were attending this, campaign event. And he goes and says at this event something to the tune of, raise me $1 billion, raise me $1 billion so that I can become president. And in return, I'll roll back Joe Biden's environmental regulations. And a lot of those proposals included, rolling back pollution regulations, lifting the moratorium on gas exports that Biden put out, and also expediting permits for new drilling projects, which could potentially save the oil industry like billions, like in, hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks and other benefits. And for some people, this is seen as like an example of like a quid pro quo. Remember that word, right? Which is being investigated by certain watch groups, but let's and campaign finance experts as well, about like is this legal or ethical or whatever. And since then, this is where the politically motivated stuff comes out. Like House Democrats led by Jamie Raskin have launched an investigation into that meeting to figure out whether or not any laws were violated. But like, that's par for the course. Like, fucking anyone could do anything, and the opposition party is going to launch an investigation into them. That just seems to be like the standard for politics these days. But I guess the question goes, like, is that what you're talking about here, Henry? Right? Like, big money. How do these trials impact big money? Because we already know that he's got to pay a lot of money in legal fees. I think right now he owes like $400 million or something like that in legal fees from these verdicts that were drilled against him. So he doesn't have a lot of personal cash. And he's recently just put his daughter-in-law in charge of the RNC, for which she has very clearly stated that they're going to be using a lot of that money to go towards Trump's like legal defenses. And now we have this situation where, you know, he's at Mar-a-Lago saying, give me $1 billion and I'll give you what you want. I'll give you the laws and regulations that you want.
Yeah, well, that's so. If you look at, so his website apparently crashed because of the donations that he was receiving, his campaign website. So I don't know. I imagine that he's right now collecting tens of millions of dollars in political contribution, probably, you know, maybe even more.
His website could also just be being attacked by a DDoS, so that doesn't really tell you very much about how much money he's actually raising. We'll have to find out when he. You
can reasonably speculate that right now, as we speak, that he's raising a shit ton of money. Can you agree with that? Like, you could reasonably speculate that he's receiving a shit ton. Like, there's a lot of cash being injected into his campaign.
I think he's probably making a lot of money in his campaign, but I don't think it's any more money than he would have made. It's an election year, and it's, you know, the election's a few months away.
You don't think that his little emails that go out to, you're the #1 Trump supporter in the area, you know?
No, I mean, I don't
people
think
aren't people aren't donating more money. I mean, I think people probably are. When did all the Democrats made so much money in campaign contributions when after Trump was elected? Because Democrats were like, oh my God, we're in crisis mode. We need to start the resistance.
But again,
like the amount of money.
Remember what we've been talking about here, where we're saying, you know, does this impact the voter? Like, how much do we think it's impacting the voter? But
we said it may not impact the moderate, but I'm saying it's going to galvanize his base already. So there is definitely an uptake right now of individual contributions to his campaign. It's guaranteed that he is. I mean, he had 80 million votes last presidential election. He's absolutely collecting a lot of money off individual campaign donations. But that's not even what I was really getting at. I mean, I brought that up. But the main point I'm trying to make is that, so he's in legal trouble. And now you have a bunch of Wall Street billionaires, you know, injecting cash into his campaign. And I'm not sure what the timeline on this is, if these contributions were coming in before or after, but they certainly were coming in during the trial. It came out that Bill Ackman, the Financial Times released an article that Bill Ackman is going to be supporting Trump. Bill Ackman is a lifelong Democrat, and he is going to support the Republicans because he is a committed Zionist.
Yep. And
what I think, because we talk about foreign policy,
right,
for the most part, and that's what I want to get into, is how much. So Donald Trump is a very Zionist president. He's among the most pro-Israel, if not the most pro-Israel president of our lifetime, or at least blatantly pro-Israel. So a lot of his top donors are already big Zionist. Like Sheldon Adelson, who's dead, but now his wife His wife just donated, I think, $20 million to Trump. So will this be an opportunity for the Israel lobby to get a future Trump presidency to take steps that he may have not taken in his last presidential term? And when I say take steps, Trump did all of the aesthetic stuff in terms of, he did more than aesthetic stuff. He assassinated.
He killed Soleimani. He
assassinated Soleimani. He moved the embassy
to Jerusalem, and also he brokered the Abraham Accords, which really mean nothing right now. But yeah,
my question is, the next step is, will he take a more aggressive posture against Iran and Hezbollah? That is the question that I'm thinking about. Mm-hmm. Will a future U.S. president, will Republicans in power in 2025, will they be more likely to provide a military support to Israel if they go to war with Hezbollah? Mm-hmm. I mean, the U.S. would already do that right now. However, I think behind closed doors, I think the U.S. is telling them that don't attack Hezbollah, please.
Right.
Do not invade Lebanon, because we're going to have to come in and you can't do it without our support, and we just don't want to get into this right now. I think that is kind of the basic conversation going on. Will that conversation change to a more will that conversation change?
Yeah, let's go do it.
Where, hey, you're in office because of all the money that you received from these big Zionist groups and Zionist donors. You're expected to do this. So I wonder if that affects the future foreign policy of a Trump administration.
I think that's a fantastic question. Yeah,
because we are still, and I have no idea about who's going to win the presidency right now. I think it really is a toss up. Mm-hmm. I think it's a coin flip. I don't think one is really favored too much. I think you can really flip a coin. But you're seeing the general vibe, and just going into the zeitgeist, the general vibe that I've been getting with Trump is that a lot of powerful institutions have kind of been making peace with him, or just coming to terms with him. There are powerful money networks that do support Trump, and you really have to account for that interest as the primary guide to what a future Trump presidency would look like, rather than what the demands are of the ordinary Republican.
So many things to respond to there. So let's talk money first, and then let's talk geopolitics. So money wise, last I read, and this was back in April, so I don't know how much has changed since then. And to your credit, earlier I did Google it. You're right, his campaign website did go down immediately after the verdict, so maybe he's going to get a big infusion of cash. But as far as the April numbers that I read last goes, Biden had about $192 million cash on hand in his campaign, and that would be compared to $49 million that the Trump campaign's account had, right? So there's a huge disparity between the two campaigns in terms of buying power. And considering that, like I mentioned before, Trump's daughter-in-law is co-chairing the RNC and has, in no uncertain terms have said that they're going to be using a lot of those campaign funds to help support Trump's legal fees. That means that at least some proportion of that money is probably not going to go towards things that'll help him to get elected, rather just things that'll help him stay out of jail. So with that being said, I think personally he would have to get a huge infusion of money, and I think very large doses of money all at once raises eyebrows. So it's going to be very hard for him to hide behind like, hey, how'd you get $100 million overnight? You know, where'd that money come from, right? Like, it's going to raise a lot of questions. So I think it'll be difficult for these big money groups to funnel the kind of money that he's needing to catch up to Joe Biden's campaign money, or even surpass it. So that's the first thing, the money part. The geopolitics part is very interesting. And I think the reason why I find it very interesting is because I'm not sure either. I think it could go a few different ways. The one way, and this is credit to Trump here, he didn't start any like Middle East foreign wars, right? I mean, he did some shit that I really disagreed with, like pulling out of the JCPOA and like, you know, a few other things. But like when it came down to it, he didn't start a new war, and he's been fairly anti-war, you know. Killing Soleimani was about the craziest thing he did, but you know, if we're going based on his track record, I wouldn't assume that he would be his MO is to start new foreign wars. Now, if he gets a bunch of money from like Israeli firms or like AIPAC or some shit like that, would that change his mind? I don't know. Maybe, you know.
I mean, he already was receiving money from Zionist groups.
Right, but for other things,
Sheldon
right?
Adelson basically funded his campaign, his last campaign, and it looks like his wife, Miriam Adelson, will be doing the same.
Right, and he made good on that investment, right? He did all of the things that we just outlined with regards to our relationship with Israel, you know, strengthening that relationship through, you know, the moving of the embassy and, you know, all the other things that we talked about, right? So he made good on that campaign contribution, but like, what's the campaign contribution got to be for him to change his like track record so far of basically not wanting to start foreign wars? Because that I will give him credit for. You know, he at least outwardly and in practice did not start new foreign interventions. So like, how much money it's going to be take? Like, what's it going to cost to get him to change his mind?
It's interesting. It's, you know, my question is like, he may be on that track to do that without bigger donations. You really don't know what his presidency is going to be, or the level of the mental state that he's going to be in to even, right. You know, if he would, let's just say if he does have if he does have a disagreement with some big donors or with just his cabinet, because, you know, the chances are is that, you know, he already said that Nikki Haley is going to be in his administration. That's a mess. Yeah, I mean, he said that. Maybe she won't. Maybe she'll wash dishes at the White House. Which I would, you know, I don't think she's qualified to do even that. But it's you know, he's going to, his administration is going to be stacked with the same people that were stacked in his last administration. It's going to be
right. Only the best.
It's not, I don't know if you call these people neoconservatives, because neoconservatives, you know, that the term is overly used to describe like just like every Republican or just every mainstream politician who has conventional views. But, you know, the neoconservatives are a couple dozen people. You know, it's from PNAC and from the 90s, who are, most of them are, I don't know if I made this point on our last podcast. I feel like I did.
Yeah, I think recently. You did, like your Bill Kristols and your...
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of dozen of them. Most of them are so elderly that they're out of politics or they're dead.
Right.
But there's kind of the neoconservatives, I guess their overall ideology is pretty much spread across both parties. So, you know, every prominent politician basically has the same exact foreign policy views. There's no difference. There's really a very thin line of difference between the average Republican and, you know, Chuck Schumer. on their views on U.S. foreign policy. There may be a couple of outliers who have some unique views. Maybe somebody, Thomas Massie, obviously, but Thomas Massie is one. But maybe like Matt Gaetz has some. He doesn't agree with the Ukraine funding. I mean, that's a big question too. Now that I said Ukraine, is like, what's his policy going to be on Ukraine? Because if the war, which seems like it will be going on, I guess we're presuming that he's going to be elected right now, which may not be the case. But I mean, we probably should for this episode, just because it makes it more interesting. Would his policy on Ukraine even change?
Well, I don't know, because the interesting part about Ukraine is that Biden's administration right now is courting the idea of lifting the embargo on using American weapons provided to Ukraine inside of Russia. So to translate, up until this point, any and all of the arms that we've been giving to Ukraine comes with a condition. The condition is you can use this all you want inside of Ukraine, but you can't use these weapons to like cross the border and hit inside of Russia. There have been attacks that the Ukrainians have been doing inside of Russia, but those are their own self-made or purchased elsewhere weapons that they've been using to launch those attacks on Russia, like inside of Russia. Now they're starting to talk about this is news from like literally today. The Biden admin is starting to talk about maybe lifting that embargo, and if that does happen sometime between now and this theory that we're having, or this thought experiment where Trump becomes a president in January of 2025, that would signal to me that this war doesn't end before then, right? If anything, that war gets even more hot. Because now we're saying we're allowing U.S.-made weapons to penetrate Russia, and Putin, they're not going to just sit around and be like, okay with that. So I think that war escalates as a result of that. And whether or not Trump decides to, what Trump decides to do in his capacity as president in 2025 would be very much incumbent on how hot that war happens to be in that moment. And the decisions of his predecessor, right?
Yeah.
So much like how Obama had to kind of continue a lot of the same shit that George Bush did, when he started our Middle East wars, is because that was the shit that he got himself into, right? That's the situation that he found himself in when he got there. Now, second presidency, we can make some arguments against Barack Obama for that, right? But at least that first initial couple of months and that first term at the very least, you can make the argument that your decision making has a lot to do with whatever the fuck the last guy did. So on this particular point, I think it's still going to be there, and it might even get hotter. So
yeah, I mean that's a good point, because what most likely, so if the war's on, which hopefully it's not. I really wish our initial predictions of the war ending quickly were true, but if the war is still going on, and let's just say if Russia is launching an offensive to take Odessa or something, I don't think that Trump will have the political capital, even if he objects to that, to stop humongous aid packages from being delivered to help
for sure
the remainder of the Ukrainian army from defending Odessa. Because I don't think he has the political capital. And honestly, he was had this big aid bill that recently was
that was 95 billion or whatever. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That he was working with Mike Johnson to get the vote, the necessary votes from Republicans to get that passed. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't. It's not like he has some strong objection. Most of his objections to Biden have been just kind of partisan in nature. oh, like he's not smart enough to deal with Putin.
Or he's
You
not
know, they
strong
haven't really
enough. I
been.
would have did it in the first 24 hours or some shit like that, right?
It's
Yeah.
there's no reason to think, because I mean, during the Trump presidency, that's when the United States started arming Ukraine with. That's when Ukraine. I mean,
There was a fucking impeachment over whether or not he withheld arms to Ukraine
look at
in the first place. Yeah,
all it takes is looking at the Trump administration. Look at Ukraine in 2014 and 2015.
Right.
Look at the Ukrainian military. The Ukrainian military wasn't very good in 2014, 2015, to the point where they couldn't even essentially put down a rebellion from the Donetsk and Luhansk militias. Like they couldn't, the first battles of that war they were losing. Now the Ukrainian army would obviously, the current Ukrainian army would roll over Donetsk and Luhansk without Russia within probably like a week. Like that it would be nothing.
Right.
Or maybe not now because there's been so much wear and tear. But the Ukrainian army of 2022 would have taken Luhansk and Donetsk pretty easily without the Russian military there.
Right. There's a bit of a chicken and the egg though, because the reason why they got that good was because of the incursion by Russia and therefore our support of them, right? Like by that I mean the 2014 incursion, right? So we started arming them and training them and stuff like that in response to Russia going in and taking Crimea.
Yeah, I mean, where's the point I'm trying to go to? So I was going to go down a rabbit hole of, the Ukrainians started it by doing the street push to the CIA. But we don't need to go down that rabbit hole. We already discussed it enough.
Yeah, we've beaten that horse dead. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just, Ukraine became a world-class military during the Trump administration.
Right.
So between 2016, 2017, those are the years that Ukraine got juiced up with a lot of their military strength, and obviously a lot of the juicing up has happened in the past 2 years after the the special military operation, quote unquote, started.
Right.
So it's hard to think of like how would he even have the diplomatic ability to wind that down. The only way that I can see that,
big. Yeah,
the momentum's so strong that it could be just like one of those things where how everyone promised to get out of Afghanistan, but nobody had the political power to do it
until Joe Biden came along.
Yeah, until Joe Biden came along and did it. But Obama promised to do it, then.
Right. Trump promised to do it,
and Obama did the exact opposite.
Right,
he did the surge.
Yeah,
I mean he then Trump promised to do it, and Trump did get the ball rolling on it.
He started. Least. To his credit, he started,
but it took.
He didn't do it, but he started
over a decade. It took almost 20 years to the point where guys who initially were part of the first fights with like Al Qaeda, where their sons were serving.
Yeah, that's fucking wild.
That's how that was the generational gap between that war. I'm not saying that this Ukraine war is going to go on for 20 years. I'm just saying if that has so much momentum, and this war is it's at such a larger scale than Afghanistan. There's so many more casualties. There's so much more advanced weaponry. There's so much more cash being made, most importantly, from U.S. firms in such a small amount of time. That how can he come in and just be like, hey, all you guys who are profiting on this war, all these institutions that were created to support this war, it's all done. Like, he's not going to be able to do that, especially if there's a large-scale offensive from the Russians. The only thing that he could possibly do, or what I would see would be the outcome or would be the way that he could pivot would be if like the Pentagon just says, hey, like we need to focus on China now. Like this is getting this is such a distraction. We need to pivot to East Asia.
Right. That's a really good point. And I'm glad that you gave me that opening to segue, because fucking China's going crazy right now. I'm sure you've probably read or heard about the military drills that they were doing around Taiwan that I think just concluded like today. Like I read a Reuters article earlier today that said that China's military announced that it had, quote, achieved its objectives during the recent drills around Taiwan. And for those that are unaware of this, they literally encircled Taiwan. It looked like a dress rehearsal for invasion. And actually, the reason what got me super spooked about it was because, and we've talked about this before, and specifically with Joe Solis Mullen, is that in the months of like April-ish and October-ish are when the waters between the strait, between China and Taiwan are the calmest. So that would give you the most opportunity, the best opportunity to do an invasion. And they happened to do this big drill where it looked like they were just about to invade, right? So that shit looked pretty hot for a second, and I'm glad that it didn't actually pan out to be that. But here's the thing that I think is going to be an October surprise for you, Henry. Remember, like I said, it's April and October are the times when the waters are calmest, and they just did a dress rehearsal this past April. And a lot of people were on high alert and shit like that. So October surprise might just be a Taiwanese invasion.
That would be. I'm thinking about what is going to be the October surprise this year, because both sides are going to have one.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, the October surprise of the last campaign of the last presidential election was so. It was basically the Hunter laptop stuff was the October surprise, but the Democrats' October surprise was basically having their political allies suppress that story from getting out. that was
right.
That was the October surprise. But
right.
I mean, let's get a bit. I'm not advocating for this, but it certainly would be more entertaining. Let's get an October surprise that's more consequential than
than like just a crackhead's laptop. Even though there was some pretty.
Well,
I hear you.
There's some pretty implicating things on Biden in those, but you know what I'm talking about. Let's get like an Iran hostage substance. Deal type October surprise. That's a real October surprise.
Yeah, exactly.
Working with the Iranians behind the scenes to arrange the date that the hostages are going to be released. Now that's what I call an October surprise.
That would be like, impactful too, right?
That's what I call impactful. That's a masterfully done one. Working with the North Vietnamese on your withdrawal of U.S. troops, that's an October surprise.
Right.
So
what about
other Republicans have done it? The Republicans have historically done the October surprise better. So maybe they'll come up with a better one this year. But then they'd have to collaborate with China, right?
But the thing is, Republicans generally do a better October surprise when they happen to hold the presidency. I don't think that they do.
Reagan and Nixon were both not holding the presidency. They were both challenging the incumbent.
When they did what?
During their October surprises. So the October surprise was against Carter and then against Lyndon B. Johnson. So the biggest one, probably the most known one, was with Ronald Reagan, was essentially talking to the Iranians about releasing the hostages on a specific date, just so they could have the countdown and all the criticism of Carter not doing enough to release the hostages.
I strike what I said before then. I hear what you're saying.
So it'll be interesting, but then we're talking about, if a China-Taiwan,
it's getting late.
You'd have to be collaborating with like China to some degree to pull that off, right?
I don't
Let's
think
see. That's
I don't
totally
think Trump has
hypothetically
any
speculative.
ties to China, to be honest. It would be more prevalent or relevant if,
Or to be working with Taiwan, like, hey, we got your back. Do this aggressive maneuver to provoke a war.
right.
That wouldn't be, the Taiwan wouldn't do that though. They're not.
No, they're not.
Taiwan
Actually,
doesn't want a war.
funny enough, Taiwan just held elections and more seats went to the
Kuomintang
political party. The political party that's more China aligned. I'm blanking right now.
Yeah, it's Kuomintang.
Yeah, thanks.
So the old Chiang Kai-shek party that was super anti-China, obviously is now the pro-China party, and the what was it, like the Democratic something whatever? It's the anti. They're like more pro-Japanese. The other party, so it's kind of switched hands of what the the political parties switch their allegiances. But yeah, I mean, I think eventually Taiwan is just going to be politically absorbed into China, and hopefully there's no horrible military conflict that starts. But let's turn to, how much time are we in?
Yeah, we're
an hour and 24 minutes.
Yeah.
So let's talk about. Should we talk a little bit more about the Middle East before we wrap this up?
Sure. What do you want to talk about?
Because we touched on it for a second. So I don't even want to talk about the recent atrocities in Rafah because they've just been so horrible, nightmarish. And I don't want to go too much into Israeli policy right now because I'm too tired. But I do want to talk about how could a potential Trump presidency or a Republican-led executive office, how could that be different than what we have right now? Because right now, the situation you have is that you have, and this might be the reason why Joe Biden loses the election, because he turns away enough young voters who are pro-Palestine and Muslim voters in swing states in Michigan that he doesn't, that could be.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating topic. Did you read recently that Benny Gantz and his party was saying that they've already moved to dissolve the government and hold an early election? Did you hear about that? They're dissolving the Knesset and they're going for another election. So the implications of that is that Bibi no longer has this clutch on the premiership. I'm curious to see if he pulls any random, we're in a war, I don't have to leave kind of cards. I don't know Israeli constitutional law well enough to say whether or not that's a thing or not. But I think if it's not a thing, this severely,
they don't have a constitution.
Well, you know what I mean. Whatever
they have, common law,
exactly whatever their equivalent is. I'm not like a law, international law scholar in that respect, so I don't know. But if there's not something in there that would bar him from, basically holding on to the premiership indefinitely, in response because he's in a wartime, then I think this severely impacts how this all plays out. And as it relates to your question, could this be the thing that that kills Joe Biden? I kind of agree. A lot of young people, a lot of swing state voters are very disillusioned with Joe Biden on the way that he's handling the war, because many of those groups feel that they should be that the United States should be doing more to end the war and not support Israel with more weapons. Be that as it may, though, this might resolve itself. And the way that I think it resolves itself is if this goes through with Benny Gantz and his party calls a re-election, and that election comes before the United States election, doesn't go super favorably for Netanyahu, we could see a de-escalation just by virtue of it just depends on who ends up in the premiership thereafter, right? So if there is someone more moderate that comes out of that woodwork rather than the ultra right current Knesset that we see, I think it's entirely possible that starts to wind down much faster than it has been now, because I know that, you and I were talking about this a while ago, like how we feel like it's winding down, but if anything, right now in the most immediate time period, it feels like it's fucking ramping up, because now they're bombing the north again, right? Like, and it doesn't seem like they've achieved any goals, right?
No, it is winding down. It's not what they're doing right now is not comparable to what they were doing in October and mainly like November and January.
I guess
it's not.
So
it's not. It's bad. It's horrible. Like they're still they're still killing a lot of civilians.
What
they were doing before was fucking crazy.
Intensity and intention are two different things in this case, though. I think intensity is lower. I give you that. But intention is different. So they left and withdrew out of a lot of the portions of northern Gaza because they claimed that they had neutralized the threat there. And if you notice how that has been moving, they've been moving south and south and south, right? They went into Khan Yunis, which is that area immediately under that middle line in Gaza. And they pushed everybody to Rafah and said, okay, we got to secure Khan Yunis. And then now they're working on Rafah, of course, which is a grave mistake, because where does everyone go? They pushed them all again north or to the west. But as that's been happening, we've now been seeing a lot of rocket fire in the north coming out of Gaza into Israel, and now Israel's needing to now go back into the north and reinvest in the north. So truly, their stated intentions were that they were going in to neutralize Hamas, and when they moved out of those areas, their stated intention was that they had accomplished that, and clearly they haven't. And so now they're re-engaging with, more northern areas. So, and that's all to say, like, atrocities aside in Rafah, like that's already fucked up as it is. But the fact that they're having to double back and go back into some of those areas that we thought they were done with indicates to me that they're not quite done with their stated intentions, which is to neutralize Hamas, which we both know is fucking impossible, right? We both know that that's not going to happen. And even if they physically killed all of the Hamas people, they're radicalizing a whole new group of people anyway.
No one's asking this question, but how many people do you think have joined Hamas since the war started?
I have no idea, but and what do we mean by join too? Like, do we mean
people who have decided to take our
card holder or
no, people who physically are like, okay, I guess I need to fight, and they joined Hamas and are now in the tunnel.
I can imagine that. I can imagine a good amount of them have.
And now in a tunnel, being trained and hopping out of tunnels, trying to get shots at IDF troops. Like, I think I haven't seen a number on that. Mm-hmm. But I would imagine that
number on that. I don't think
I would imagine that there's a lot of guys who there has to be a level of new recruits that Hamas has been getting, given the current circumstance, given
and if it's not now,
the motivations.
And if it's not now, it's like soon. Like, I mean, they can end this work today, right? Like, say, declare victory, do whatever they want, right? Pull out. In the next 10 years, there's going to be a generation of like young boys who grew up without a family, who were subject to that ridiculous bombardment, and this is going to take years to rebuild Gaza in any meaningful way. So they're going to be living and growing up in rubble, right? They're going to radicalize. So whether it's Hamas or something else that comes after, it doesn't matter. They're going to be radicalized, and whether or not you agree is kind of irrelevant, right? This is going to happen. I don't think it's a question, right? Unless they literally kill every single Palestinian in Gaza, and for that matter, all of the ones in West Bank too. Any and all of those survivors are going to feel some kind of way about what happened. Whether they're correct in feeling that way or not doesn't matter. They're going to be radicalized. And if you fail to see that, and if you fail to see that as a very real possibility, then you haven't been paying attention over the last almost 30 years of war.
Well, John Mearsheimer had a speech the other day, and it was really good. Just You can find it on Google. Just type in John Mearsheimer.
I actually saw that on YouTube. It's on my watch later list.
It's a really, really good talk. And basically he says that the Israelis are in a position where the only option that they have is ethnically cleanse. That's the only political option that they have is to complete the ethnic cleansing, because apartheid is unsustainable, and the two-state solution is impossible because of the settlers. So you need to ethnically cleanse if you're Israel. So how far are they going to go to achieve that political goal? Man, I don't know. The thing, going back to like just Trump and Biden has given them, there hasn't really been any red lines. You know, I did not think that, I thought that the deaths would be in the tens of thousands after the October 7th. I thought there was going to be like some like number that they were like, okay, this is the number that we're going to tolerate.
We're satisfied,
over it.
right? Mm-hmm.
And I thought that, I really did think, I don't know why I said this to myself, but I thought that number would be around 20,000 dead.
Yep. We blew way past that.
We don't know what the death is.
I think it's like 36,000 right now.
It's at 36. It could be, most likely it's a lot more, because there's a lot of bodies that are covered in rubble, and then they're not taking into account all the starvations and people dying of diseases and stuff like that. So it's probably higher than 36.
And also it's not over yet, so more people will die.
Yeah, it's not over yet, but all in all, you're going to have a lot of people who have been killed, and you know, this was something that was tolerable for the current administration that is being lampooned from the right in American politics for betraying Israel, if you can believe it or not. So the criticism, I mean, this really can impact Biden's campaign, because he is in a position where he pleases nobody, because the majority of Democrats believe that Israel's committing a genocide. If you look at the polling data, it's something like 56% of Democrats believe that that the Israelis are engaged in an act of genocide. I think while like 20% of Republicans do. But that is a big number in your voting bloc. And I'd have to imagine some of that would be more.
Biden came out recently saying, "Oh, what Israel is doing is not tantamount to genocide."
Yeah,
that was a statement he made recently.
Of course. But on that side, so you have that. So you have, you know, the enabling aspect. But on the other hand, you have these stories that are going out that are being leaked to the press from the Biden administration about him getting tough with like Netanyahu, which seems so fake. Like, they don't seem like they really happened. It just seems like PR stuff that they're feeding. Like, oh, like we're upset too, and today Biden told Netanyahu that this is the last time he better see any dead civilians. Like,
well, I mean, his red line was Rafah, and Rafah's happening literally right now. So
could you imagine him standing up to Netanyahu? Come on, man! Like, he can't even make a speech in public. Like, come on, man! It's just, you know, like no tanks. I wouldn't even want to see it. It would probably just, it would be totally awkward to watch. Let's just put it that way. But that's giving Republicans, and just like the overall posture of like a lot of Democrats are way more likely to be opposed to what Israel's doing than Republicans. It gives the American right and the Israeli right the ammo to go and like say all these crazy things like Joe Biden's an anti-Semite and Joe Biden is betraying our greatest ally. So he is losing favor with the really hardcore Zionist and also the people who are opposed to, you know, Israel's treatment of the Palestinians. So he's, from both sides, he's getting hit, which I think could, you know, will cause political problems, and it could potentially cost him the election. The thing about Biden, though, I don't think they want to see Gaza be ethnically cleansed. Like, I think they do have a sort of red line where they're like, listen, like, we'll let them, settle their bloodlust, but we're not going to let them, push all these people into tent cities into Sinai. Maybe that changes.
I wonder what that line is, though, because it feels like we're butting right up against a line, right?
It's,
we surpassed our line a long time ago, So
yeah, I mean, we'll never know what the line will be released, in like a Seymour Hersh article. I mean, he's like 85 now, so I don't know how much time he has with articles, but I mean, he tends to be the guy who breaks these stories. I mean, maybe, or, Politico or The Guardian could release something. It will definitely be like a institution that's more, obviously liberal. Or maybe Haaretz. I mean, probably Haaretz would break a story like that, to be honest. So what is the red line? But then is there a line for the Republicans? Because what I always say is that the Israel lobby tells the Democrats to jump, and they say, how high? Mm-hmm. And when the Israel lobby tells Republicans to jump, they say, off what?
Yeah.
The Republicans' whole campaign strategy is to call Joe Biden a communist anti-Semite. Like, that's the rhetoric that you're hearing on the right. It's really, really kind of dumb. And that's the only way I could say. It's just dumb stuff from 2016. They're like, oh, he's a Marxist socialist and he's anti-Semite. He's so dumb. He doesn't want the Palestinian terrorists to be, they're crazy. So what is the red line that the most pro-Israel president of all time, what does he give them? Does he say, I mean, do they just did you say
what more could he do?
Can you, push all these people in the desert? You have our support. I think though, for the Israelis, that actually might hurt them. I mean, I would say it would hurt their public image even more. Their public image has already been, extremely tainted in the eyes of most countries or most people. But if a Republican does it, if a Republican were backing Netanyahu like the way Biden is, the protest would be way more extreme, because you get to not only protest Israelis' treatment of the Palestinians, but you also get to protest the fascist dictator Trump, the vulgar right-wing dictator Trump. So I would imagine that the Israelis actually have less political cover with the Republican administration. They may have less maneuverability.
Yeah,
because they don't have the cover of having the Democrats who are allegedly a little bit more sympathetic to the Palestinians, and the Republicans who look at them as subhuman. So maybe they maybe that's bad for them. Either way, it would just be so shocking to see a World War II style population transfer happen. It's hard to imagine that in the 21st century, but who knows? Maybe that is the that is something that a Republican administration would tolerate. I tend to think that what they would do, the Republicans would probably be the easiest answer is that they'd have a harder line with Iran, because we make all these jokes about Iran, allegedly being 6 months away from building nuclear weapons.
Yeah. And in 6 months,
eventually
they're
they are going to
have the
be
bomb.
6 months away from building a nuclear weapon.
I mean,
At some point,
now maybe.
at some point, they're going to probably make one, and will a Trump-led presidency, or I'm just saying Trump-led. It's just Republicans at this point, man. Like, there's no difference between Trump and the average Republican at all. If you just look at who's around him, even who he's catering to right now, it's all big money people. The populist message from 2016 does not exist, or barely exists. Is it more of like, we have your back in a war in Lebanon? Are we going to be more aggressive in Syria with Iran proxies? Are we going to actually strike Iran nuclear facilities?
As it relates to, I think this relates both to Trump and to Biden, but we're talking a lot more about Trump today. So presumably either of them, could win the presidency, and that's their last term, right? So what would either of them have to gain, politically speaking? Because they're both old as shit, right? They're not doing anything after this, and that's the one thing that I feel happy about this election cycle, is because like we're done with these two, win or lose. If your guy wins, if your guy loses.
Until the next batch of people are even worse.
Frankly, I'm curious and somewhat terrified, and also somewhat excited to see what's the new group of things that we can talk about, because I'm fucking sick of this. Like, we're not going to get Hillary Clinton again. That's over. That train is gone, right? We're not getting any Bidens anymore. We're not getting fucking Trump anymore. It doesn't matter who wins after this next 4-year period. We're done with this. Like, I feel like we're done. It's over. So with that in mind, what incentives, political or otherwise, would someone like Trump or even Biden have for playing ball with big money and, Israeli politics, like AIPAC or anything like that? Like, what incentive do they have to like play ball? Because especially for Trump, he wrote the fucking book called The Art of the Deal. So I don't think I'm being a stretch here by saying that he's a very transactional kind of guy, right? Like he'll do the you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. But I'm wondering how does he benefit from here? Like the leverage made sense in his first presidency because he would need a second presidency, right? The leverage made sense before he became president in the first place because he wanted to become president. And the leverage would make sense up until the election because he wants a second term. But thereafter, what's the incentive? I feel like that incentive runs out real quick for both of those candidates.
Well, I could see a second-term Biden administration looking at it more like that, because that's how you saw Obama act when he was on his way out.
Exactly.
So Obama, 2011, 2014. So Obama waited until he was a lame duck to condemn Israel, or not to really condemn them, but I guess it was an act of condemnation when he decided to not veto a resolution in the UN condemning continued settlements in the West Bank.
Right.
That was like the last thing he did as president. He was in his lame duck stage.
Right.
Probably more likely to see that from a Democrat, because just because the Republican Party is also very just ideologically Zionist. A lot of the Republican Party is filled with hardcore Christian Zionists, and these are people who. And Trump, I don't think Trump is a Christian Zionist. He just sees them as like, these are the guys with money, these are the guys with power, these are the guys I'm going to court. So, the Muslims don't, bring me these benefits. So I think that's the way that Trump sees it. Maybe he does, have that epiphany, but he also has like a political legacy that he cares about. I'm sure with his family. You have to remember that his son-in-law is Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner is a very, very, comes from a very kind of hardcore Zionist donor family. So it just may be kind of like family tribalism that shapes his policy position. But I do agree that there's not really an incentive to get reelected, but there's other incentives outside of just like your reelection campaigns to. That's
a good point.
To work with the lobby.
Yeah. I don't see that working with Biden because, I don't think Hunter's going to go for any political offices in his lifetime, but Trump, yeah, I could see that lasting legacy, for his kids or for Jared being a thing. That's a good point.
And it's also, they want to put since Trump is the Republican Party at this point. I don't think any administration wants to see the White House flip to the other party. That just makes them look like a bad president. They want to see their vice president or whoever is running in their stead win the election. So I mean, there's other incentives. I mean, Trump will be 82, 83 at the end of his second term, or be older, right? No, he's older than that. What is he, 78, 77?
Yeah. Trump age.
Or no, he might be...
He's 77 now, so add 4 to that.
77, so he would be
81, 82 years old.
Or yeah, my math is bad. So 80...
He would be Joe Biden's age
80s,
today.
Dude.
Yeah.
That would be
Joe Biden's age today.
Yeah, I don't know what's scarier, that he would be in his 80s or Joe Biden is already in his 80s.
I mean, they're like, we're talking about 77 versus...
Man, Biden would be 86, so he'd be 85 at the end of his second term?
That's right. We're talking about fucking peanuts, though. Like, a couple of years when you're that old means nothing, like...
Oh, man, I beg to differ, man. A couple of years when you're that old means a lot. My grandfather, when he got... It was like the age of like 78 to 80 was profoundly different. Like when my grandfather was like in his late 70s, he was like completely sharp. He was quick. He could drive. When he hit that, the big 80, he was unable to drive, really couldn't.
Yeah, but cognitive decline, though, is not incumbent on a specific age range, right? You can get cognitive decline in your 60s. Right, that varies from person to person, and it's like a specific pathology, right? But when like all things being the same, we're talking about two adult human beings that have the same cognitive decline, like the same average cognitive decline. At the ages 77 and 81, there's no functional difference between the two. Now we can ask the question about, well, is Joe Biden having more cognitive decline than Trump, or vice versa? We can have that debate, which is super fun.
I mean, you guys can just watch. You guys can just, people can just like listen to them speak and
just
come to their own conclusion instead of like having a partisan debate over it. But it's, I mean, either or, both of them are old as fuck.
And that's also part of the reason why I'm so excited about this election cycle to be over, because can we get somebody any amount younger than that? I'm a big Bernie fan, and I would be upset if Bernie was still alive after this term and decided he wanted to run again. I'd be like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Let somebody else run, we need a new batch of something. I'm over this crowd.
Yeah, well, be careful what you wish for, because the next batch, I mean, do you see the younger batch of Republicans and the younger batch of Democrats?
Yeah.
The younger batch of Democrats were so unappealing that they had to put in Biden.
Old people, Right. Same thing with the Republicans, I'd argue. But
I agree that the Republicans are
right.
I mean, I don't know what the political party.
Well, we
I
have
tend
to rip
think
that Band-Aid off anyway, right? The boomers are going to die, like whether we want them to or not, right? Whether we're afraid of the, Gen Xers or old millennials taking over power or not, like that generation's going to die soon. They're not going to be available anymore for these roles. So,
the future of the Republican Party, I kind of see the power turning to the kind of Silicon Valley dissident types like Peter Thiel, who's already extremely influential. But I see it kind of falling into the hands of people like J.D. Vance. And for the Democrats, man, that's really tough to say. The Democrats really
maybe
don't
the squad types,
much.
they're the only people
But they're too polarizing. The thing with the squad
I know, but
types,
they're the only ones that have any like clout.
I mean,
or
it would
celebrity,
honestly.
or
This is
visibility.
the thing about them is that as much as a lot of people are going to find this offensive, is that they'll become more relevant. Those types of like politicians. As the white majority in America decreases,
which if you subscribe to the replacement theories that there is already happening, so
I mean it is happening. Like there's, and you could say it's a good or bad thing. I'm not making a judgment on it, but like, and the demographics of the United States are going to be different in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
Right, it's not going to stay the same.
I think the Democrats tend to have like two branches. One that kind of runs on minority, representing minority groups, and then the other one is kind of more, kind of like technocratic, I would say. But I don't know where it would come from. It would be interesting to see, but I don't really see a Democrat right now that has. And I'm not making a judgment if they're a good person or like if I agree with their politics. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying like a good appealing politician. Like there's no like Barack Obama on the bench.
Exactly. I agree with you. I think so. I mean, that's part and parcel with the reason why we ended up with two fucking geriatrics for options this time around, because there's no other options. There's no other better options right now, and that's sad. That's really sad. This is the best we got right now.
Yeah, for the Democrats, I'm really trying to think hard and give like an honest. Like, is there like a person that people like who's young, who's not like just super polarizing, or just not too far into like socialist politics that
I'd argue the same for Republicans. I don't know of anyone that's not too polarizing on that side, but I can see some people on that side that are polarizing but then nevertheless have like broad appeal, at least I'm saying
basis. Like in terms of charisma. There's really not much on the Republican side either. So I'm not trying to like make an argument, but I feel like there is, for the Republicans, there is like at least people that they at least have who they're turning to be the future of the party.
From a
Democrats, I don't think they've
American
found that person.
Here, I think the people with the most broad appeal on the Democratic side are, frankly, like people like AOC. I think she has the most charisma out of that party right now, and has the most virility and the most, maybe not broad-based appeal, but certainly the most visibility. Like people know who she is.
Yeah, she has the most visibility. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see if somebody pops up. But we're not a political podcast, so we don't normally talk about such things. This is just.
I'd be curious to see like what. Never mind. I'm gonna keep that to myself.
What? Curious to see what?
I was just gonna say like what are their foreign policy stances, and what would presidencies for for like these up and coming potentials for the next cycle, like what would that mean for us geopolitically? Like what would an AOC president look like geopolitically? You know, like I'm curious about that.
Geopolitically, it would be exactly what we have right now.
Maybe.
No, I'm like honest. Like it would be exactly what it would. AOC would forfeit any type of foreign policy decisions to the quote unquote deep state, and a future Republican foreign policy would look very much probably like, very similar to what Trump's foreign policy would look like. And honestly, Trump's foreign policy is going to look very similar to Biden's foreign policy. We're talking about these hypotheticals of what's going to be different about them, but their overall policies are going to be extremely like they're not going to be similar. They're going to be very similar.
They're not going to be dissimilar, right?
The rhetoric might be different, but the actual policy decisions are going to basically be the same. Like there's not going to be that much of a difference. There really wasn't a difference between the things that you would say that Trump was hawkish on, like China, and what Biden's policy has been, which has been pretty much an escalation of hawkishness against China.
Yeah,
and
I agree with that.
But on the flip side, everyone on the people on the right who have started criticizing the war in Ukraine, or the U.S. funding the war in Ukraine. The thing about that is that a Trump policy probably wouldn't be very, very different from a Biden policy in that regard. At least, at the very least with the forward momentum. I think the difference is with Ukraine is that the liberals are, I think, more ideologically invested in the war in Ukraine, because they see Putin as a proxy for a lot of the things that they find distasteful, like authoritarianism and stuff like that, and authoritarianism. And
man, a couple months ago, I would be so agreeing with you, but like I just think that this new war in Gaza is really taking away a whole lot of attention. At least for younger voting blocs. Your older establishment Democrats you're probably right on the money for that remark, but I just
I think in the future, yeah, I think in the future that with younger demographics and how and kind of what they've witnessed on social media and how Palestinians have been treated, and a lot of younger people have like saw this and they're like, holy shit, like let me read a book about this, or like let me go to ifamericanew.com,
right,
which is
listen to
the best website you can go to if you want to learn about it. The conflict in Israel Palestine is by ifamericanew.com or .org. I think it might be .org. It is the most concise history of Israel Palestine.
It's .org, by the way.
It's .org. It's like a really good website. And then after reading that, you can read other books about it. But yeah, more people are learning about it, and even on the American right too, a lot more people are a lot of younger people on the right wing are a lot more they're questioning the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, because I still am probably, if I think a left winger would consider me a right winger, if I laid out like all of my political views and social views. I'm extremely questionable. I'm not actually. I don't question it. I'm very opposed to how Israel treats Palestinians, and I consider myself on the right, or I did.
Well, because a lot of these issues kind of transcend, those domestic policies, right? Like I think, especially from doing this show, Henry, because like I'm on the opposite side. I'm more of a lefty, and I know we don't talk about this very often anymore because we've been doing this show for so long. But truly, when we started this show, it was two guys from opposite ends of the political spectrum that enjoyed talking about history and geopolitics. And I think as the years have gone on, we've found so much common middle ground in our anti-war stance, in our reporting of a lot of these conflicts all over the world, and in our reporting of all of the geopolitical machinations that lead us into these issues. And I think those things transcend our social policies or our domestic policies, things like that, right? And
you can spend less time staying in the know about all things gaming and get more time to actually play the games you love with the IGN Daily Update podcast. All you need is a few minutes to hear the latest from IGN on the world of video games, movies, and television with news, previews, and reviews. You'll hear everything from Comic-Con coverage to the huge Diablo 4 launch. So listen and subscribe to the IGN Daily Update wherever you get your podcasts. That's the IGN Daily Update, wherever you get your podcasts.
We all know how important it is to keep your eye on the money, and not just your own. To follow trends, track financial situations, follow gains and losses, check out the Yahoo Finance podcast. Every day, we'll give you a quick overview of the latest market and financial news that you need to know. You'll be able to hear about the biggest headlines in the business world in 3 minutes or less, right after markets close. It's perfect to listen to while you make another cup of coffee or work out a new budget. Check it out now. Listen to Yahoo Finance wherever you get your podcasts. That's Yahoo Finance wherever you get your podcasts.
I don't think Israel.
Well, I just find those
is a domestic question. I also don't think Ukraine is either. But they take these flavors in our domestic sphere, right? Because we seem to draw the lines, right? The Democrats are, their war is the Ukraine war, and the Republicans, their war or their coming war is the Taiwan war, but on this Israel one, it seems like it started off a right-wing thing and then went left-wing, and then now kind of everyone is questioning it equally.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking at it sideways, like what's going on here?
The thing about it is that a lot of people are looking at the war, and a lot of people are like, they're just learning everything all at once, and it's like kind of blowing their mind. And some people are taking, the full vial of red pills all at once.
Yeah.
And
just ODing on them.
That could be a little dangerous too. Yeah. Because what I find is that, someone will be like, oh man, our relationship with Israel is great. And then they're like, I guess there is a lot of like pro-Israel money that goes around in politics. Like, oh, okay. I kind of understand that the, a lot of the backers and a lot of the people who pushed for the Iraq war were Israeli groups, and then they'll be like, oh, the USS Liberty, they attacked a U.S. ship, and then it's like, oh, the Holocaust didn't happen. It's like, so it's.
Well, I mean, I hope that they don't go there, right? Because I think that's like jumping over a wide chasm. But I could see where you're getting at. It's like they'll red pill themselves on a bunch of things that might be legit to look into and raise eyebrows about, but then fall so deep into the rabbit hole that they fall into some bullshit like Holocaust.
Yeah, then they'll fall into like, they'll fall into,
just because of the momentum alone, I think,
Yeah, they'll fall into a pattern of just like looking for Jews everywhere.
Yeah.
Where, like whenever they look at politics, they'll just be like, let me look at everyone's last name. Oh, Schweitzman. Oh, we got one.
Yeah.
That guy's degrading the movement. You know what I mean?
Up.
Like,
yeah,
so then you're just like collectively condemning people, and that is not the right approach to do do that because
and I think part of the reason why this ends up happening is because talking about Israel, and we've said this so many times over the course of our podcast history, talking about Israel has always been such a third rail of politics that because no one wants to talk about it and address some of the legitimate issues and concerns that I think most rational, normal, non-partisan people would have with this relationship, I think it's relegated these conversations to the backwaters of the internet somewhere. Like the fact that you have to go to ifamericans.org, a website that nobody's fucking heard of before, to find out information about this conflict. It tells you something, right? Because now suddenly you're like swimming in the same, pool as the people who think that Holocaust didn't happen, right? And
yeah,
because we can't have an open conversation about this, now we're relegated to those dark corners of the internet where we can find a whole lot of bullshit.
Well, when you push the conversation underground, it tends to become a lot more venomous, and then those conversations don't go away. They always come back up into the sunlight. So it's like you may as well just like talk about real political issues like an adult and not without like prejudice
or precondition
against ethnic groups, and just just call the balls and strikes as you see them, instead of like thinking that some things are off limits to talk about because they might you might be called a name or something like that. You just, talk about what you think is happening and what you see. But at the same time, like, don't like go in like the complete opposite direction and start like just drawing up all these like conspiracies where they most likely don't exist.
Right.
Which I think which does happen a lot, where it's like, you'll talk about the Israel lobby, which is probably the most politically powerful group in I won't be around the bush, but then it will be like, I want to go and look up like the conspiracy of international Jewry to frame Hitler on for the Holocaust. It's
weird shit.
That happens, and that's a lot of things that's kind of that's wrong with like, we spoke about this last week a bit, or 2 weeks ago. When you make conversations about something like illegal in some cases, like in Europe, where you're not allowed to, there's laws about Holocaust revision. What these type of laws, these speech laws do is that they legitimize the argument of the people that you're restricting the speech of, because then you're like, well, they can't beat our argument in the public debate sphere, so they have to make it illegal. Mm-hmm. So you're in turn making those arguments more appealing to people.
Right.
So you may as well just have like, the conversation, or just like the real discussion about like what happened in history, and just don't be scared of like conclusions that you would find.
Right.
There's enough evidence
there's enough real and legitimate evidence to talk about and to raise eyebrows about, that you don't need to go and make weird new conspiracy theories. Like there's plenty of things that are fairly out in the open that you can discover that are weird and worth talking about. There's no reason.
Yeah,
there's no reason to go into the strange, bowels of the internet to find it either.
They're entertaining. Like, I would never say, it's entertaining to read conspiracy oriented stuff, and you can definitely learn some stuff, but like, I wouldn't read them like they're like the holy gospel of like, oh man, this is the man on the hill speaking. This guy with his blog is the man on the hill who just speaks an absolute truth. Like,
right.
You're probably going to learn some stuff, but just realize that there's going to be some wacky stuff mixed in there.
Right.
And then that's how you should treat the mainstream media as well. Like, there's going to be factual reporting in the mainstream media, but there's going to be a lot of stuff that's omitted.
Right.
That doesn't provide the full context of what you're reading about.
It's worth looking at some stuff that you don't necessarily believe either, because I think it was Aristotle who said it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it, right? It's okay to like read the opposition's newspaper. Like it's fine to read that article that your crazy uncle put on Facebook just to see what they're talking about. That's okay. You can do that. It's not going to kill you. And you can do that without accepting it as well. It's all right to entertain weird thoughts without accepting them. Just be critical about what you read. Be smart.
Yeah, just read it and just be like, okay, this person sounds nuts.
Yeah,
or read it and be
along.
like, okay, this person sounded nuts on that point, but that point I never knew about. So
Right.
maybe I'll look into that and like, okay, that guy was wrong.
Right.
Okay, that person was right about that, but he was wrong. You know, just use your critical thinking is a skill that everyone has.
Right.
Just use it when reading the news and just don't get wrapped up in like partisanship, like the Twitter space that I listen to. Oh, well, when Hunter Biden's laptop was just got like, it's just like, man, just let everyone just fucking chill out. Like, why is everyone yelling? Like this is you guys are acting like fucking like people arguing over like I don't even know. I'm trying to find a funny analogy to this. I was going to say people arguing over like PlayStation and Xbox back in the day, but
Kind of.
yeah, I mean that's like you sound like fucking tools.
Right.
So get so worked up over some of this stuff is crazy. It's crazy to me. All right, we've been 2 hours and 13 minutes.
Well,
on the
let's see how it. Yeah, let's see how it cuts down. It was a fun conversation, though, Henry. I'm glad that you decided that you wanted to have kind of a looser one today. This was fun. We should do this again sometime.
Also, because the subject matter that we were planning to do in the history front is very controversial, and I was like, fuck, it's like super late and I need to speak in very coherently on this. Okay, so let's end the episode and agree to disagree on the things that we disagreed on, and agree to agree on things that we did agree on. All right, guys, thanks again for listening to another episode. If you like the show, rate and review the podcast. It is the number one way to support our show. You can also join our Patreon. Danny, are there any other things that you would like to say?
Nope.
Okay. Peace, guys.